We don't believe that B.B. King came from a poor family, had a poor education, and his later life was not any better. This is what B.B. King's fans asserted because they had placed a lot of hope in his natural talent. To be fair, B.B. King deserves a happier life to match what he has contributed to the Hollywood music scene. However, according to what his daughter has revealed, B.B. King's harsh real life has gone against the expectations of fans. Keep calm to listen to her rare sharing. When talking about aspects of B.B. King's life, most fans question his short education, and according to B.B. King's daughter, her father only completed 10th grade for a special reason. Indeed, B.B. King's early teenage years were marked by the loss of his mother and grandmother, the two women who had raised him. After their deaths, King, at the age of 14, found himself at a crucial turning point in his life. Alone and in search of stability, he decided to attempt living with his father's family in Lexington, Mississippi. His father, Albert King, had been largely absent from his life after his parents separated when B.B. was just 5 years old, and the relationship between father and son was tenuous at best. Sadly, this new living arrangement did not work out as young Riley had hoped, leaving him feeling displaced and unsupported once again. Faced with the failure of this attempt to find a new home, King took matters into his own hands. He made the difficult decision to leave Lexington and return to Kilmichael, the town where he had lived with his mother and grandmother. Without any means of transportation other than his bicycle, King embarked on the long journey home, pedaling across the Mississippi countryside. It was a solitary, arduous trek, and yet it demonstrated a remarkable level of resilience and determination for someone so young. Once back in Kilmichael, King resumed the familiar work of picking cotton on the plantations. The labor was grueling, the pay meager, and the environment unforgiving, but it was the only way he could make ends meet. In an effort to pursue something more fulfilling than plantation work, King also returned to school briefly. However, formal education was not something that aligned with his aspirations, and he dropped out in the 10th grade. Life in rural Mississippi offered few opportunities for advancement, especially for a young African-American boy in the Jim Crow South, where segregation and racial discrimination were the law of the land. Nevertheless, while cotton fields and school may not have provided the future he sought, King's dreams of becoming a musician began to take shape in earnest during this period. One of the key influences in King's budding musical career was his cousin, the legendary blues musician Booker White. White was a well-established blues artist who had already made a name for himself in the music world. Recognizing his young cousin's talent and passion for music, White took B.B. under his wing, offering both guidance and inspiration. White's mentorship proved invaluable, not only in terms of refining King's musical skills, but also in giving him a glimpse of what life as a professional musician could look like. Through White, King was introduced to the deeper traditions of the blues, a genre that would eventually become his own artistic identity. King's relationship with White also extended beyond music. White helped King land a job at the Newberry Equipment Company, a much-needed source of income. This opportunity provided some stability for King, allowing him to support himself while continuing to nurture his passion for music. However, White's influence was not only professional, but personal as well. One of White's most enduring pieces of advice to King was about how to present himself as a bluesman. "When you play the blues, always dress like you're going to the bank to borrow money," White famously told him. This simple yet powerful piece of advice stayed with King throughout his life. In addition to educational issues, B.B. King's complicated marriages are also something that fans are extremely interested in. Following B.B. King's daughter, he was married twice, and both marriages ended in heartbreak. His first wife, Martha Lee Denton, was a woman he met after returning to his hometown of Kilmichael, Mississippi, following a brief stint living with his father in Lexington. King and Denton married in 1942 when King was still in his late teens. As he will later recount in a 1998 interview with Rolling Stone, King was deeply in love with Denton. "I guess I was looking for love because I'd never had anybody I truly believed loved me," he reflected. This speaks to the emotional void that had been left by the loss of his mother and grandmother at a young age and his distant relationship with his father. King's desire for love and connection was strong, but as his career began to take off, it became clear that maintaining a marriage while pursuing a life as a musician would be a significant challenge. Though King was madly in love with Martha Lee, their relationship was marred by his infidelity. King, who admitted to having a wandering eye, was caught flirting with another woman early in their marriage. This incident cast a shadow over their relationship, leading Martha Lee to become increasingly guarded and distrustful. Although King was still deeply devoted to her, the trust between them had been shattered. Their marriage, strained by King's growing fame and the temptations that came with it, eventually crumbled. In 1950, after 8 years together, the couple divorced. Reflecting on the end of his first marriage, King acknowledged that his own actions, particularly his inability to remain faithful, played a significant role in the marriage's downfall. Following the end of his first marriage, King focused on his burgeoning music career, but love found him again a few years later. This time, it was with Sue Hall, a woman he met during one of his nightclub performances. Hall and King's romance blossomed quickly, and they married in 1958. However, this second marriage came with its own set of challenges. Hall, aware of the demanding nature of King's career, agreed to marry him on the condition that she could accompany him on tour. King, who was often on the road performing, agreed, and for a while the arrangement seemed to work. Yet, even with Hall by his side, their marriage could not withstand the pressures of King's lifestyle. Touring constantly, playing late-night gigs, and being surrounded by the trappings of fame all contributed to a growing emotional distance between the two. King later admitted that he struggled to open up to Hall, something he regretted deeply. While he had learned from his first marriage that fidelity was crucial, his emotional unavailability ultimately led to the unraveling of his second marriage. After 8 years, King and Hall divorced, marking another failed attempt at lasting love. King's reflection on his second marriage revealed a deeper regret than he felt over the dissolution of his first. In his interview with Rolling Stone, King noted that while he had learned some lessons about love and loyalty, he still could not fully let down his emotional guard. The very life that had brought him so much joy and fulfillment as a musician seemed to prevent him from forming the deep, lasting connections he longed for in his personal relationships. Despite his 2 failed marriages, King had no shortage of romantic relationships throughout his life. He fathered an estimated 15 children, all born out of wedlock, a fact that King acknowledged but often remained private about. According to CNN, King's children were born to several different women over the course of his lifetime. This complicated family dynamic reflected both King's complex relationship with love and the inherent challenges of maintaining personal relationships while living the life of a traveling musician. When asked about B.B. King's scandals, his daughter accidentally mentioned the tour bus lawsuit grandfather. By the time the 1950s arrived, B.B. King had begun to firmly establish himself as a powerhouse in the blues music scene. His path to national recognition had been marked by hard work, relentless touring, and a string of recordings that showcased his unique style and mastery of the guitar. It was his 7th single, 3 O'Clock Blues, released in 1951, that catapulted him to fame. This song became a massive hit, reaching the top of the R&B charts and solidifying King as a rising star in the blues world. With the success of 3 O'Clock Blues, King embarked on his first national tour, expanding his audience and reaching new levels of stardom. The success of that single marked a turning point in King's career. No longer just a regional act, King became a national sensation, and his fame only continued to grow throughout the early 1950s. His blend of traditional blues with his own emotional delivery and innovative guitar work made him a standout artist in a crowded field. King's signature guitar style, with its fluid, expressive bends and vibrato, set him apart from other blues musicians of the time, and his sound began to influence a generation of artists who would follow in his footsteps. By 1955, King had become such a popular performer that he decided to invest in a tour bus, which he affectionately named Big Red. The purchase of this bus signaled that King had reached a new level of success. No longer confined to small local venues, King was now touring extensively across the United States, bringing his music to fans in cities far beyond the Mississippi Delta where he had grown up. In fact, the following year in 1956, King and his band played an astounding 342 shows, each at a different venue. This relentless schedule demonstrated King's commitment to his craft and his desire to reach as many people as possible with his music. His live performances were known for their energy and emotional depth, with King's soulful voice and intricate guitar playing, leaving audiences mesmerized. However, life on the road, though often exhilarating, was not without its dangers. In 1958, King's career was nearly derailed by a tragic accident. While his tour bus was traveling through Texas, it collided with a gas truck on a bridge. Fortunately for King, he was not on the bus at the time of the accident. None of his bandmates were severely injured, but the driver of the gas truck tragically lost his life. This horrific event cast a shadow over King's otherwise successful touring career. To make matters worse, King's insurance company had recently terminated his policy, leaving him exposed to significant financial risk. The widow of the truck driver filed a wrongful death lawsuit against King, seeking damages for her husband's death and his conscious pain and suffering before passing. The lawsuit, a devastating blow to King both emotionally and financially, resulted in a judgment against him. King was ordered to pay $375,000, a staggering amount of money at the time. For King, who had worked so hard to build his career, this lawsuit threatened to undo much of what he had achieved. The financial burden of the lawsuit was immense, and it fundamentally changed the course of King's career for the next several years. According to Music Radar, paying off his debts became King's top priority, and this meant making some difficult decisions about how to continue performing while managing his financial obligations. King could no longer afford the large band he had been touring with. In order to cut costs, he downsized his group, keeping only a small number of musicians with him on the road. The grandeur of his earlier tours with a big band and full production was scaled back, and King began playing more modest venues. B.B. King's difficulties did not stop there, according to his daughter. As his finances gradually became more stable, he was challenged by the way he managed his assets. King's introduction to gambling occurred during his frequent performances in Las Vegas, where the lights, excitement, and promise of quick fortunes drew him in. According to King of the Blues, the rise and reign of B.B. King, it was a game of Keno that first ignited his gambling passion. King's producer, Stuart Levine, recalled in the biography how King's first experience with Keno ended with a win of $23,000. The rush of winning such a large sum of money in one go only fueled King's desire to gamble more, and it didn't take long for this hobby to spiral into a full-blown addiction. At the height of his gambling addiction, King would reportedly sit at Keno tables for 24 hours straight, completely engrossed in the game. His bandmates, who witnessed his behavior during these sessions, would sometimes find him wandering around, searching the floor for lost tokens after he had exhausted his funds. The image of King, a blues legend who had worked so hard to achieve success, reduced to scrounging for tokens after losing at the casino, was a stark contrast to the commanding figure he projected on stage. While King's addiction to gambling was financially and emotionally draining, it wasn't long before his manager Seidenberg became gravely concerned. Seidenberg was well aware of how much money King was wasting in casinos, By King's own estimation, he had lost around $40 million gambling over the years. This staggering amount, earned through years of hard work and tireless dedication to his craft, was disappearing quickly, and Seidenberg knew that if the problem wasn't addressed, King could end up financially ruined despite his immense success. One of the most alarming moments came in 1975 when King announced that he had accepted a residency in Las Vegas. For Seidenberg, the idea of King living and performing regularly in the heart of casino culture was troubling. He feared that being surrounded by the temptations of gambling on a daily basis would exacerbate King's addiction and could ultimately lead to financial disaster. However, Seidenberg also understood that it would be impossible to keep King out of Las Vegas altogether, given how integral the city had become to his career and earnings. In an attempt to save King from further financial ruin, Seidenberg devised a strategy to help curb his gambling addiction while allowing him to continue performing. He made a critical intervention by advising King to refuse any form of casino credit for his performances. Instead of receiving cash or chips that could be immediately gambled away, King would be paid through checks, making it more difficult for him to impulsively gamble his concert earnings. This arrangement allowed King to see the full amount he was being paid and gave him a tangible sense of the value of his performances. For King, this change made a significant difference. As he later recounted in a 1998 interview with Rolling Stone, seeing the size of the checks he was writing helped him realize just how much money he had been wasting. The physical act of writing those checks and understanding the financial impact it had on his wealth became a wake-up call. "When I noticed how big some of those checks were, that cured my gambling," King told the magazine. The strategy worked, and over time, King found himself less and less drawn to the casinos. He started to avoid the gambling floors entirely, choosing instead to go home after his performances rather than risking his earnings at the tables. The conversation with B.B. King's daughter continued, but the atmosphere became quieter when she mentioned her father's illness. According to rumors, in the early 1980s, B.B. King received a diagnosis that would shape the final decades of his life: type 2 diabetes. At the time, King knew little about the condition, and the news came as a shock. As he later reflected in an interview with Diabetes Health in 2005, the diagnosis filled him with a sense of dread. "I thought I wouldn't live very long," King recalled, admitting that his lack of understanding about diabetes left him fearful of what the future held. King's journey with diabetes, however, would prove to be one of resilience, determination, and ultimately survival in the face of a serious health challenge. King believed his diabetes may have been a hereditary condition. His father, Albert King, lived to the age of 87, but according to King, he had struggled with high blood glucose levels and gout. While King's father survived into old age, his mother, Nora Ella King, was not so fortunate. She passed away when B.B. was just 9 years old, and while the exact cause of her death remains unclear, King suspected that diabetes may have played a role. Before she died, Nora reportedly went blind, a condition that King later speculated might have been related to undiagnosed diabetes. This family history of health issues made King wonder whether his own condition was inevitable. In addition to the possible genetic factors, King's early life in poverty may have contributed to his later health issues. Born into a sharecropping family in the Mississippi Delta, King grew up in an environment where nutritious food was scarce. As Dr. Gabe Merkin, a physician and radio talk show host, pointed out, King's impoverished upbringing likely put him at a higher risk for developing type 2 diabetes. Malnutrition during childhood can predispose individuals to chronic diseases later in life, and King's early experiences were marked by deprivation and physical labor. Dr. Merkin also noted that photographs of King from his younger years revealed signs that he may have been at risk for diabetes long before his diagnosis. "His huge stomach tells me that he was already headed for diabetes and was probably diabetic for many years before he was diagnosed," Merkin wrote. King's diagnosis with type 2 diabetes meant that he had to make significant adjustments to his lifestyle and learn to manage a condition that would require ongoing attention. Living with diabetes brought a number of challenges for the blues legend, who was accustomed to a demanding touring schedule and a high-energy performance style. One of the first symptoms King noticed was insomnia, a condition he attributed to his diabetes. In a 1998 interview with Rolling Stone, King expressed his frustration with his inability to sleep, explaining that it was affecting both his health and his ability to perform at his best. As the years went on, King began to experience additional health problems, many of which were exacerbated by his diabetes. Despite these challenges, King remained committed to his music. Even as his health began to waver, he continued to perform nightly shows, driven by his love for the blues and his desire to connect with his audience. However, by the late 1990s, King started to doubt whether he could maintain the rigorous schedule he had followed for most of his life. The physical demands of performing, combined with the effects of diabetes, were beginning to take their toll. In April 2015, King's health took a serious turn for the worse. He was hospitalized for dehydration, a complication of his diabetes. For years, King had managed his condition with the help of his doctors, but as he grew older, the strain on his body became more difficult to manage. His hospitalization in 2015 was a sign that his health was rapidly declining, and it marked the beginning of the end for the blues icon. Just a month after being admitted to the hospital on May 14, 2015, B.B. King passed away in his sleep at the age of 89. B.B. King's daughter said that his death is not the end. What should have been a time to celebrate the life and legacy of a beloved musician quickly turned into a contentious and highly publicized legal battle within King's own family. At the heart of the controversy were allegations from two of King's daughters, who accused two of the musician's closest aides, Laverne Toney and Myron Johnson, of poisoning their father in the days leading up to his death. The accusations came shortly after King's death, with Patty King declaring, "We're his children. We're going to fight this with every breath in our body." Both women were adamant that foul play was involved, sparking a murder investigation into the circumstances surrounding their father's passing. Toney and Johnson, the two individuals tasked with caring for King during his final days, became the focus of the investigation, with the family alleging that they had poisoned the ailing guitarist. Laverne Toney had been King's longtime manager and had a close working relationship with him for decades, while Myron Johnson was one of his trusted aides. The claims made by King's daughters were met with shock, not just within the family but in the broader public as well. Given the outpouring of love and respect for B.B. King after his death, the idea that he could have been deliberately poisoned cast a shadow over the celebrations of his life and music. News outlets picked up the story, and the case quickly gained national attention. The accusations were particularly troubling because King had been under medical care for several years, dealing with various health issues, including type 2 diabetes and the complications that come with old age. The situation became even more complicated when the results of King's autopsy were released in July 2015. According to NBC News, the autopsy concluded that B.B. King had died of Alzheimer's disease and complications associated with old age. There was no evidence of poisoning or any other form of foul play. The report seemed to provide some closure for those close to King and fans alike, who had been unsettled by the idea of their musical hero being the victim of a crime. Despite the findings, the damage had already been done in terms of public perception, and the accusations had deeply divided King's family. Even though charges were dropped against Laverne Toney and Myron Johnson, the fallout from the accusations was far from over. Myron Johnson, in particular, filed a defamation lawsuit against the family, seeking to clear his name after the allegations had cast a cloud over his reputation. The legal dispute over King's death and the management of his estate became a painful and prolonged saga that continued to play out in the courts. The accusations also exposed deeper rifts within King's large family. B.B. King fathered an estimated 15 children throughout his life, and the fight over his estate further exacerbated existing tensions among his children. At the heart of the dispute was the question of who would control King's estate, including his financial assets and intellectual property. The fight to appoint a trustee to manage King's legacy became a bitter battle that played out in public view. In 2016, a year after King's death, The Hollywood Reporter provided an update on the ongoing legal battle. According to the report, the fight over the estate had still not been resolved, and King's children were growing increasingly frustrated with the situation. His son, Riley B. King, voiced his disappointment, saying, "My dad told us, even when I'm gone, I'm going to take care of you. But we haven't received a dime since he died." For King's children, the promise that their father would provide for them after his death remained unfulfilled, adding another layer of complexity to an already fraught situation. Even so, B.B. King's daughter still mourned her father's fate. In an emotional moment, she choked up recounting her father's unlucky starting point. B.B. King suffered a great hurt when his parents separated while he was only 5 years old. This separation was a profound moment in his early development, as it set the stage for a life filled with instability and self-reliance. After his parents' separation, King and his mother moved to the town of Kilmichael, Mississippi. His mother, however, struggled to provide for the two of them and soon put young Riley to work. At the tender age of 7, he found himself laboring on plantations, a grueling reality that he would later channel into his emotionally charged music. Despite the harshness of his environment, King found solace and inspiration in the church. For many African Americans in the rural South during this period, the church was not only a place of spiritual refuge, but also a vibrant cultural hub, especially when it came to music. Gospel music, in particular, became a source of inspiration for the young King, and for a time he dreamed of becoming a gospel singer. The melodies and rhythms of the church left a lasting imprint on him, blending with the sounds of the fields and work songs, all of which would inform his unique style. One key figure in his early musical development was his preacher, who taught him the basics of guitar playing. This was a pivotal moment in King's life, as it introduced him to the instrument that would eventually become synonymous with his name. Hungry to learn more, King made an arrangement with his boss, exchanging work for his first guitar. Eager to improve, he continued his education through mail-order instruction books. These early steps demonstrated not only his love for music, but also his resourcefulness and determination, qualities that would define his career. However, King's early life was marked by tragedy as well. When he was only 9 years old, his mother died, leaving him alone in the world. This devastating event profoundly affected him, as it left him to navigate life without the guidance or support of a parent. He remained in the family's home by himself, a child trying to survive in a world that demanded much of him. During this time, he attended a one-room schoolhouse, where 92 children were crammed into a single classroom. Outside of school, he continued to work on the plantation, picking cotton and milking cows to sustain himself. These harsh conditions of rural Mississippi life further fueled King's desire to escape poverty and make something more of himself. Reflecting on this period of his life, King later remarked, "I swore as a poor kid that when I grew up, I would have what I wanted to eat when I wanted to eat it, and I would never sleep in a dark room." This statement speaks volumes about the impact of his early experiences. The darkness he mentions refers not only to the literal absence of light, but also to the metaphorical shadow of poverty and deprivation that loomed over his childhood. By the age of 11, B.B. King found himself in a position that few children could imagine, let alone endure. The segregated South of the 1930s was a harsh environment, And for King, it became even more unforgiving after the deaths of his mother and grandmother. His mother passed away when he was just 9, leaving him in the care of his grandmother. Tragically, she too died 2 years later, leaving the young boy orphaned and grappling with an uncertain future. King's feelings of abandonment were palpable. In an interview with Classic Rock in 2012, he described his emotional state during this time. "I felt deserted." Despite having some relatives nearby in Mississippi, King found little comfort or support from them. These relatives were not people he felt a strong bond with, and their presence did not alleviate the isolation he felt. The circumstances of his grandmother's death compounded his difficulties. At the time of her passing, she owed money to the owner of a cotton farm, which resulted in the home being without electricity. The lack of basic amenities further underscored the bleakness of King's situation. Remarkably, despite these daunting challenges, King maintained a semblance of normalcy in his life. He continued attending school, an achievement in itself given his precarious circumstances. When he wasn't in class, King worked tirelessly in the cotton fields to support himself. This work was grueling and labor-intensive. In a 2008 speech reported by USA Today, King reflected on his experience. He earned 75 cents a day for chopping cotton and 35 cents per 100 pounds of picked cotton. He recounted one particularly grueling day when he picked 480 pounds of cotton, a feat he looked back on with a sense of pride. The memory of laboring under the sweltering sun and the physical demands of the work became a significant part of his personal narrative. After enduring 2 years of life alone in such harsh conditions, King's father, Albert King, became aware of his son's plight and extended an offer to bring him into his own home in Lexington, Mississippi. The hope was that this new arrangement would provide King with the stability and care he had lacked. However, the reality of moving in with his father and his new family did not meet King's expectations. He found himself at odds with his new stepmother and step-siblings, which made the transition from his previous life even more difficult. Unable to reconcile with his new family dynamics, King made a bold decision to return to his roots. He embarked on an arduous journey, cycling 100 miles back to Kilmichael, the town where he had grown up. This journey was not just a physical one, but also a symbolic return to the place that held his past, despite the hardships he had faced there. The bike ride itself was a testament to King's resilience and determination, traits that would later define his career and personal life. What do you think about the revelations from B.B. King's daughter? Leave us your comments in the section below. We hope you have found this helpful video. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you like it. Thank you for watching this and see you in the next videos. Goodbye.